Gotcha. So, well,
When it's green, you can, so that button turns it off.
okay.
So he controls everything from
So it's on
his
right
end.
now. Yeah. Hey, good morning, everyone. If we could go ahead and take our seats, we'll get started. It is 10:02.
Can I sit next to you, Joe?
Absolutely, please. Where, where do you put the sign-up sheet?
It's on that
Okay.
table.
This is the biggest
I tell
committee
you what,
room I've ever had a meeting in.
let's put it over there so they can if they need to walk up. All right. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank y'all so much for coming out today. Just a real quick announcement for our, we do have a sign-up sheet over at the podium for our public comment opportunity. So if you do want to make comments, if you would go ahead and sign up on that sheet, and that's for anybody that's not currently on the agenda. So, well, again, good morning, everyone. Thank y'all so much for coming out. What an incredible venue. I want to thank Representative Bethany Ballard for helping to coordinate this. When we reached out to find a good place, she immediately thought of here and helped coordinate this to make it happen. So thank you so much, Bethany, for all of this. This morning, before we get started, we are live streaming the event. We weren't able to provide a Zoom link, but this will be available and on the website for anybody who wants to go back and take a look at it. I would first like to open us up in a word of prayer, and I've asked Senator Sean Still to do that.
18? Good. Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this beautiful day. Thank you for the men and women currently serving in our U.S. military and those that have served in the past. Thank you, God, that we live in a free country and that we live in a place that we feel safe. Thank you for getting everyone down here safely. We pray for everyone's safe return. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And then I would like to provide Senator Payne an opportunity for any opening remarks.
I just say good morning to everyone and thank you. What a good-looking group we have here this morning. And just I'm honored to get to do this and continue fighting and pushing the envelope to do the things that we can, especially for those men and women that have served our nation and put themselves on the front lines for freedom. And so I just say thank you for being here and let's get to work.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. Again, thank y'all so much. We had a very productive first meeting, I believe, and we have one more hearing scheduled out in Augusta that will kind of close out our opportunity to look at the how veterans benefits are delivered in Georgia and how we might make some adjustments and improvements to move it into the legislative session. So the first thing I'd like to do this morning as a part of the official part of the meeting is invite Dan Rhodes to come up to the podium and just provide a bit of a welcome and then talk to us a little bit about kind of the facility we're in and then the 21st Century Partnership.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Chairman, both for Chairman Payne, Chairman Bonner, and all of the committee members, thank you so much for driving down here today. Appreciate you being here. Thank you, Bethany, for choosing the museum. This is a beautiful, beautiful venue, and so glad that you guys were able to be here. On behalf of the Museum of Aviation, as I said, thank you for attending. Hopefully you will get an opportunity to be able to wander around and take a look at all the great assets they have in this museum. We've got 4 hangars here. Each of them have a lot of good capability. I would encourage you to spend some time. If you can't do so today, please consider coming back in the future. This place is amazing. As for the 21st Century Partnership, so for those that don't know, I'm the COO of the 21st Century Partnership. Our organization was started in 1993 in response to base realignment and closure activities in Congress. who was looking at bases to close to save funding. Robbins Air Force Base was on that list, and due to the efforts of Senator Nunn and a lot of folks within the community, we were able to fight against that, and the community was able to save the base. Since that time, we fought against several other BRACs, last one being in 2005. Not anticipating another BRAC anytime soon. However, what we need to do as all of our military communities across the state of Georgia is to ensure that we have the assets in place and that we are strategically positioning our communities to be the best strategic asset for Department of Defense and serving the needs of our military members. So that is what the partnership does. We work within our community to articulate those needs, to position our community to be that strategic asset that is needed. We work to ensure that we have the technology and capability within the community, that we're building the workforce we're going to need for the future, and that we are developing all of the types of programming that we need to be able to help with that. A great example of that, and something you all were involved with last year, is HB 880. Thank you so much for the passage of that bill. That helped all of our military spouses, which then helps to retain the military service members that we have in. If the military spouses can't find jobs, they're going to be asking their service members to go ahead and get out of the service, and that's not something we want. So that's a great example of the part that you all play in the organizations like the partnership. I would say that there are organizations like us around the state, whether it's in the chamber or you're going to Augusta. Dr. Tom Clark out there is an amazing partner of ours within the Fort Eisenhower, Alliance for Fort Eisenhower. So hopefully he'll be coming out and seeing you all. We have those organizations across the state to do that same support for our other bases. So thank you much for your support today. If you have any further questions, I'll be here today. Just so that you know, about 11:30, we'll be getting some lunch back in here for y'all, so please enjoy. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate everything that you do, and the 21st Century Partnership, I think, is just a great model of how organization in the civilian community can partner with active component base and really connect the community and ensure that if there's ever even a hint of a closure, that the federal government would think twice about closing that based on the economic ties between the community and the base. So thanks so much for what you do, Dan.
Thank you, sir.
Also, before I forget, I would like to recognize Chairman Shaw Blackman, who is here today. Chairman, would you like to bring a quick greeting or just stand up and say hello from where you are? Great. Thank you, Chairman Blackman. We've got a lot of constituents with some questions on the amendments that we want to send your way, so we appreciate that. No.
And thanks for those of us in North Georgia reminding us that this is not South Georgia, this is Middle Georgia.
That's right. Thanks so much. All right, moving on with the agenda. First, I'd like to call Commissioner Patricia Ross from our Department of Veteran Services, and really wherever you feel more comfortable, Commissioner. Commissioner Ross has been doing an incredible job in her tenure in the office, and she provided a really good update at our last meeting as to what the Department of Veteran Services does and how they partner with the Veterans Administration in processing these packets for benefits. And so she's here this morning to provide a bit of an update for us. So, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Bonner, and thank you all for having me here again. I promise this will not be a rehash of what I spoke to you about last time. I think y'all got that pretty loud and clear as far as what we as Georgia Department of Veterans Service do for our veterans and their families. I did put slides, you should have them in your folder, as well as some other documentation. And what you'll hear from me today actually aren't my words as the commissioner, or even as Trish Ross, who hails from these parts. I call this place as home, even though I've been out of Middle Georgia for a couple of years. So the first slide, I just want to reorient us around the benefits life cycle. And I showed you that slide the last time we met, and I had the opportunity to speak with you, but this is kind of the process of a VA disability claim or pension, whereby it starts with an organization and there are multiple ways for it to then get to the VA, for the VA to make a rating decision, and then if that rating decision is not favorable to the veteran wants to contest it through an appeal, through a higher level review, by adding some supplemental information they can. And this process kind of is enduring. It kind of only stops when the veteran finally says, hey, I'm done. Or they get the rating, of course, they're seeking. And so that's a little bit of what I'd like to talk about, but more importantly, I want to address some things that we talked about at the last session. If you look at the next slide, it's called Why Accreditation. And I told you, Georgia Department of Veterans Service, we're all accredited. We're accredited with about 7 different organizations, and we are your state agency that helps veterans and their family members process their claims to the VA. As you know, we work for y'all. We work for our veterans. We don't work for the VA, but they are an important partner of ours, and they are also the ones who accredit us. So why accreditation? First, it's the law. So I gave you all the references. Again, this is not me speaking, but 38 CFR 14-629 talks about the requirement for accreditation to be able to prepare, present, prosecute claims, send anything to the VA. And it also says that to be able to do that, you first have to be accredited by the VA. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in one of my subsequent slides. So why is this important? We talked last time about the need for guardrails, the need for laws to kind of give you the right and left limits as far as helping our veterans and their survivors. Because I all know, looking out at this room, we in the state of Georgia are very proud of being military and veteran friendly, and we want to do what's right for our veterans and their families. So the guardrail is through this accreditation process. So one of the ways accreditation actually helps the veteran or their survivor is anybody that's accredited actually has access to their file, providing they've got that power of attorney. We can go into what's called the Veterans Benefits Management System and look at all the medical records that are brought in from military service, all of the VA medical records, as well as anything that they've applied for in the past. Why is this important? Without access to that file, we don't know if somebody is filing something they've already been denied, is filing something that they actually don't have the medical documentation for, and we need to advise them on how to get that medical documentation. Without access to that file, it actually potentially puts additional claims in the system that then bogs down the VA. And we all know the VA, we spoke about it before, is not timely in making decisions. And so by not having this information up front to best advise the veterans and to put in that claim for them, it does, in fact, hinder the system. So another piece that's specific to our agency, so as a state agency, we have multiple checks and balances. So when I submit a claim, I'm not the only eyes that typically look at that claim. The district manager, the regional manager, our training team go in and do quality review checks to make sure that everybody within my department is appropriately submitting things on the right form, we're submitting the form correctly, that the documentation is there, and that way we make sure that that claim is fully developed and has the best ability to, as quickly as possible, make it through that VA rating system. So again, that protects the veterans and their survivors. Another piece that you probably don't realize is that we're insured. And I hate to put this out globally, because I know this is being taped, but we have something called risk management claims, where if we are liable and make a mistake on a veteran's claim, they can come back in and say, hey, I lost out on X amount of compensation, and that's based on the VA. Either we failed to submit the documentation timely, we made an error, whatever the case may be. We're insured so that veteran or their survivor gets that compensation through our insurance. So they're never at risk of losing out. That actually protects them, it protects us, because I would hate to say that we're perfect, we are fallible, but that is one additional layer where we make sure veterans and their survivors get the compensation that they have earned and that they are owed. So if you look at the next slide, again, this is also from federal law. This is the standards of conduct. when you're an accredited agent or an attorney, these are some of the things that you have to say you are going to do. And if not, you risk getting that accreditation taken from you. So you can see that we have to provide competent and knowledgeable representation. And I'll talk about that in a second. And so this is in accordance with CFR 38 and Title 38. So we have to act with reasonable diligence. We have to be prompt in the submission of claims. And then you can see on the next slide, it was a little bit long. These are the standards of conduct, like I said, in federal law. So we can't violate the standards of conduct. We can't circumvent them. We can't engage in fraud, deceit, misrepresentation, or dishonesty. In other words, we have to uphold ethical standards. Can't violate any of the provisions in U.S. Code. We can't enter into agreement to charge, solicit, receive any sort of compensation that's unreasonable. For your initial claim, nobody actually is allowed to take compensation. It's only subsequent claims, which by law, an accredited agent or attorney can charge up to 20% of that back compensation. We can't solicit, receive, accept gifts. So you can see there's some pretty stringent code of conduct that we have to adhere to as an accredited agent. Again, we were talking last time about kind of those guardrails. This provides those guardrails to make sure, again, we're doing what's best for our veterans and their families. So we can't threaten, coerce, or even deceive a claimant about what they are going to get. In fact, we make no promises. We can look at the documentation and kind of gauge what we think the VA will rate something, but we can't make that claim because we all know the VA is an independent agency and could potentially do something else. And we're also, of course, not allowed to engage in unlawful or unethical conduct. So, again, not my words. If you look at the next slide, this is directly from your Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So this is from that agency, which is veterans do have a right to choose who represents them. It just has to be an authorized and accredited representative. And if they are represented or anybody that prepares those benefits or claims or even assists actually is breaking the law if they're not already accredited by the VA. And so why is this important? Again, we've already talked about the benefits of having an organization that adheres to a standard of conduct. We're actually held to that standard of conduct, again, by losing our accreditation and our ability to do our job. In fact, I had somebody lose their accreditation and I had to fire them because they no longer could work for my agency. So again, the Office of General Counsel, if you look at that last paragraph, is the one you can go to if you feel like you have paid or been unreasonably charged by an accredited agent, or actually now they have a site under the Office of General Counsel to turn in what the VA has termed and other veteran service organizations as claim sharks, people that are actually going out and preying on our veterans and their families and charging them money without, of course, being accredited, which again is against federal law. So what is the issue? Again, this is still, next slide, from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This is their words. Unfortunately, if you're unaccredited, those fees that an individual chooses to pay are illegal. And they often have those organizations request a percentage or an upfront cost of whatever that veteran receives from the VA. That actually is the veteran's money or their survivor's money. In my opinion, except for significant legal cases where there are accredited attorneys who have to take things up to the Board of Veterans Appeals, you should not be charged for your claims or even being advised on their claims. You see what this can result in. You know, veterans often have these unaffordable bills. I had somebody that came to us to receive help because they weren't getting their compensation because they owed so much to the organization that had didn't represent them because they couldn't, they were unaccredited, but they had signed a contract and agreed to pay their back compensation, and now they were on the verge of being homeless. In fact, that last paragraph said some of these companies send these veterans to third-party collection agencies when they don't receive their compensation. So to kind of reiterate it a little bit more, on August 8th of 2023, so just over a year ago, 48 of the state adjutant generals signed a letter to include our own Attorney General, Chris Carr. You can see their signature. And so I'm quoting from this letter. You have a copy in your package. I went ahead and gave that to you. So you can see that unaccredited actors advertise their services as superior to free services. They often, even though they aren't free, show that they have quicker response times and even guarantee results, all of which you cannot measure. And in fact, like I said, if you don't have access to that veteran's records, it is hard to submit an accurate claim because you don't know what's in the medical file, and you have to tie what has occurred during military service to now what is an injury, an illness, or an exacerbated condition once they separate from service or retire. Some of the unaccredited actors advertise their services as coaching or consultation instead of assistance to avoid this oversight or accountability that is codified through this accreditation process. And again, they now leave the veteran entirely on their own. What occurs in many cases is because they can't represent the veteran, again, they're not accredited, they can't get access to the files. They may assist in the filling out of forms, or they may not. They may send them to free resources and still charge them. But they may assist, but then that veteran then has to submit everything on their own, which means that they are not liable for anything that occurs, whether they've filled out that form wrong, whether they've given them bad advice, unlike our agency, which again, we're insured against that to ultimately protect the veteran and that compensation. And so many times they often get their banking information and access to the VA system so that they learn about any increase in benefits so they can go in and take that funding before the veteran even knows. We've heard several cases of that occurring. And so that is one of the challenges of why you would want to have an accredited agent. So you may ask, well, there are so many organizations out there unaccredited in this space. Is accreditation, getting that accreditation, is it difficult? I will tell you no. So here's how to get accredited. So that's the next slide. So the Office of General Counsel through the VA is the one that manages the accreditation process. You submit that on a VA Form 21, something I care about, not something you care about. But you have to have a good character, good reputation. You have to have 3 character references. You have to be actually submitted and recommended to the Office of General Counsel by somebody else that's accredited, either an organization or an individual. You also have to not have a criminal background. You have to not be mentally incompetent. Those should be a given, right? If you're an accredited attorney, you have to be of good standing in at least one state bar. We have to pass a written test. Again, the requirement is to provide competent knowledge of actually Title 38. And that is the law that governs all of the compensation and benefits. And so you have to not only pass the test, but you have to have continuous education every year. For us, we get every 2 weeks, we get a class, and then once a year, we get together for a week and get more in-depth training from actually the National Legal Services Veterans Program to make sure that we know what we're doing and we know any changes in the law. And then you have to have that annual training to ensure that, again, you are keeping up with what's required to be an accredited agent. So if you go to, and I gave you the link, if you go to the VA's website, it'll give you all the organizations that are accredited with them. Again, that's not a high bar that you have to jump over to get accredited as an agency. And I just happened to pick the first screen because, of course, that does have Georgia Department of Veteran Service. So you know we are accredited as an agency. And then each of our individuals that processes claims are also accredited with the VA. So how do you know that? the next slide where I asked for questions, you can see that I went ahead and pulled up myself. So you can go to that website. You can do it by geography. I'm getting this quite frequently now, where somebody will pull all the accredited agents within a certain geographic area around where they live and send a blast email out to all of us saying, I need an accredited BSO. And honestly, the first one of us that picks it up ends up running with the claim. I did that not long after our last session and ended up getting some back compensation for a female veteran who was losing out on some funding because her dependents had been taken off her claim. They were unable to buy groceries, followed up on it. I was the first VSO to pick her up and immediately got her dependents in the system within 24 hours. And then she had the back pay. And when I called her to say it was in her bank account, she's like, yep, I just saw it, we're going grocery shopping. So that's what we can do because, again, we can see that in the system. This is who I'm accredited with. You can check me out on the website or anybody else that you would like to check. We're not the only accredited agents here in Georgia, the members of my department, but that's kind of how the process works. So I thought it was important to share that with you because I know there were some questions this last time as far as what the law says, what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says, and then, of course, I gave you a sheet in your packet that also is some of the guidance from the VA. So that concludes what I had to talk to you about. Do I have any questions? I'm looking at Senator McLaurin because I know he does.
If you have a question, if you would just raise your hand because the way our system is set up. Senator Harbison.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that very important information. I have
Thanks.
just one question that have we thought about dealing with the reasonable amount of money in each I know I believe, if I'm correct, that the initial amount is what applies out of the benefits you receive. Is that correct? But have we considered perhaps recommending some kind of reasonable amount out of each amount of money is owed by that particular, quote, coach, unquote?
Well, no, sir, I've not considered that because, again, we had our national conference with the VA last month, and this is federal law. So it does not, if you're an unaccredited agent, allow for you to receive any compensation, regardless of whether you say I'm assisting, I'm coaching, whatever word you use to term your help to that veteran, you're not authorized to get any sort of compensation unless you're accredited. And then it's only after that initial claim, and you can charge up to 20%.
So if someone, a client, feels that something has happened unreasonable, how do they go about protesting that with the VA itself or?
Yes, sir, with the VA itself. And so they go to the Office of General Counsel. They have a website now where you can submit the information. I've actually been out there to check it out. We posted it on our social media to make sure folks knew the avenues for which they can complain if, again, they're being unreasonably charged or they may have had issues with somebody they thought was representing them.
All right, well, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome,
very
sir.
important
Thank you, Senator
information.
Harbison.
Thank you.
Senator McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Blackman, for our welcome to Middle Georgia. Happy to be here. It's a very nice place to meet. Good to see you again, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
Even if I didn't have a question, I would feel compelled to come up with one, so thank you. I do want to ask, do I understand correctly, because I know we talked about this last time, the current law is that a private accredited agency cannot charge a fee for the initial inquiry or claim, but can charge a claim for an appellate process, an appeal from the initial process. Is that right?
Yes, sir, you're correct.
And this is going to sound sort of like I'm leading you somewhere, because I probably am. Would you agree with me that that reflects a policy judgment that the initial claim is kind of a public good, that we want to make sure is provided to everybody free of charge, not to impose at all on the benefits that are received, to try to tax or impose a cost on the benefits that are received? But I guess we've made the policy judgment that if you take an appeal, that starts to get into territory where we're not trying to fully fund the process for people, that at some point you've got to have some skin in the game. If you think that the VA did it wrong the first time, then that's when you start to pay in a little bit to say, okay, I want some additional process. Is that more or less the policy judgment?
Yes, sir, absolutely. You completely got that correct. And so in the appellate process, while we do have appeals agents that will do that for free, in many cases, there are some very complicated cases where you're actually trying to get a positive decision based on what's in federal law. And those accredited attorneys can charge that 20% because it does take a lot. I will tell you, having filed quite a few appeals, this takes a lot of time.
Thank you for confirming that. The reason I raise that is because, I mean, one thing I love about our committee process, in any committee that we serve on, is that we get into the weeds, we talk about some of the nerdy details or whatever, but I do think sometimes it's worth zooming out to the big policy picture, which is how is this claims process and the way we subsidize it similar or different from other ways in which people make what are called contingency fees off of work that sort of comes from, like, you know, lawyers, for example, is what I'm most familiar with. There are lawsuits where lawyers charge contingency fees, right? Which is the lawyer will take 20, 30% or more. Now it's up to 40. Some lawyers even charge 50%, which I don't agree with. But it's that level of taking from the person what is supposed to be money that is compensating them for their injury or for something really bad that's happened to them. Now we tolerate in personal injury cases that lawyers will take a substantial chunk. To me, this is different. This is veterans. This is people who have served in some of those unimaginable environments for their country in this very selfless way. It's the kind of thing where we have to make good on our bargain, right, with the people who have served. I think that puts us in a policy realm that's different from a normal contingency fee environment where we do want to guarantee that somebody has fully provided to them as part of their contract with the country that their initial claims process is completely free. And my understanding is that if we were to allow accreditation for the initial, basically agencies to handle the initial claim for a fee, we would be moving in the direction of making veteran services more like lawyers taking contingency fees, right?
Yes, sir.
And I think that my, note for the committee and what I've been reflecting on since our last meeting is I would like for us to stay focused on the context of what we're talking about and recognize how special and different it is from other environments where contingency fees are charged, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. I couldn't have said that better, and I promise we were not colluding prior to this meeting.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Commissioner Ross? All right, seeing none, thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate
Okay.
what you do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being able to address you this morning.
All right, now next up on the agenda, we've got some representatives from Congressman Sanford Bishop's staff. So, ladies, if one or both of you would like to come forward and you can have a seat if that's more comfortable, or stand at the podium. Just pull that microphone down to you a little closer. There you go.
Okay.
And if you would, just introduce yourself to us.
I'm Tony Piquel. I'm the Constituent Services Director for Congressman Sanford Bishop's office.
Wonderful. And then if you could, just kind of share some of your experience handling those claims at the congressional level and what your experience has been in that process.
Okay, I've been with a congressman for about 21 years now. Ms. Sagal, she's our Deputy Constituent Services Director. She's been with the office probably, about 15 years? She's been handling VA casework a little bit longer than I have, but with Commissioner, she is correct with the BSO offices. We used to, a long time ago, file the claims from our office, but we have stopped that over the years. And the Commissioner is correct that the VA claims, they do take a long time to process, unfortunately. The first initial claims, they are not generally approved. They do have to go to appeal. A lot of people do go to the VSO offices. We do refer them a lot of times since we are not the ones filing the claims. They think that we can file, but we refer them to the VSO offices, VFW, and other accredited facilities that can do that. We do unfortunately have some complaints on some of the VSO offices. We have some that are just out of this world. So, I would like to talk with the Commissioner on that. But they are good. and filing the claims. They are knowledgeable. But like I said, there are some complaints on some areas, and there's some kudos on some areas as well. But the lengthy process, yeah, that's an issue. But unfortunately, when COVID hit, that really hit a lot of agencies hard, and it's continued to hit agencies, not just VA, but Social Security, IRS, a lot of federal agencies. So, but that's really where we're at.
How many cases would you say you receive during a normal year?
That's kind of hard to tell. We have probably about 5 different caseworkers in our offices. And I mean, we can probably, within a year, probably, anywhere from 50 to 80. We get regular disability claims, pension claims, things that sometimes they're initial, sometimes they're appeals, all the way up to the Board of Veterans Appeals.
So 50 to 80 cases per year, roughly.
Right.
Would you happen to know if that's kind of a normal caseload for a congressional office?
Depends on your area. Some areas would have a higher caseload due to, your veterans' demographics. Sometimes with our area, we do have Marine Corps Logistics Base and more. So sometimes it can be higher.
And do you have an idea of kind of the average time it's taken your office to adjudicate or get these claims closed out?
It can take probably a year or two, because especially if they're like at appeals, especially with the board, depending on when they were filed, the board can take probably 3 or 4 years, especially if they're filing for an in-person hearing.
Okay. And how are you typically getting these cases? Are it just simply folks calling in, or are they getting referred to your office through a local VSO in the district, or how is that working?
Sometimes it's referrals from different veterans. Sometimes it's referrals from the VFW. Sometimes it's just people that, they see the congressman out and about, so they're like, oh, I need to go talk to somebody, friends, family, they come in, call.
Okay, wonderful. Are there any questions from the committee? So from the kind of the congressional office level, you said it's you plus 5 additional staffers that are accredited to process these applications.
We have about myself, Miss Peggy. We have one more in Columbus, another one in Albany, and one in Macon.
Okay, very good. And so I don't want to ask you to give any kind of opinion or anything, but I will. Maybe a way to ask some things is, in working those applications, what have been some of the bigger roadblocks for your office in either getting those packets complete or getting those through the system?
One of the biggest roadblocks is getting military records. Sometimes, unfortunately, our older veterans who may have records at NPRC that were burned up in the fire in the 70s, they don't have the records to help adjudicate their claims. They're like, well, I was there, I was doing this, I was doing that. It's not on my my DD-214. So unfortunately, if you don't have proof of what you were doing or your MO, then VA does not consider it as proof. Even sometimes with different things that you may have been doing, if there's no documentation on your DD-214 that you were actually boots on ground or things of that nature, then VA has a very, I'm not going to say warped sense, but they think inside the box, black and white, just like any other agency. If it's not in that box, sometimes they don't like to think outside that. So sometimes it's up to like the VSO office or our offices to try to get them to see outside that box. Sometimes it don't always work, but that's where their proof has to come in.
Right. And so do you have any kind of sense as to within your current workload, your caseload, do you have any kind of sense of kind of those veterans? Are they more of a certain era veteran? Are they older veterans, younger veterans, male, female? How do you have any kind of breakdown on kind of the demographics?
Most of them are older. Most of them right now, they're Vietnam veterans era. They're older. We have a few younger ones. Right now, the younger generation, Desert Storm, those earlier or more recent conflicts, the VA system has seemed to be more readily available to those. I mean, I have had some in the past with traumatic brain injuries that they're still kind of looking at those a little bit. The PACT Act, Gulf War type things, those are coming aboard. The Camp Lejeune issues, they're coming aboard. So it's mainly the older veterans that are still fighting a little bit for some of their benefits from the Vietnam.
And have you seen a noticeable uptick since the advent of the PACT Act?
Actually, those are getting kind of adjudicated pretty quickly. VA, I think, has a lot of their information already on file from previous claims, so they're able to adjudicate those pretty quickly.
And so are you finding that those that a lot of those that come to the office as a result of the PACT Act, are those typically, are those more initial filings, or are those additional filings from a previous claim?
They may have been additional where they may have filed for something previously, but then the PACT Act came aboard and they were able to just file that PACT Act claim, and they were able to okay, let's.
So it was offering an opportunity for those that it had already had a claim either in process or adjudicated to come and add to that claim based on the PACT Act. Is that?
I think so, but they also had, when they originally filed, they may have had other issues added to that.
Okay, wonderful. Any other questions from the committee? Going once, going twice? Well, thank you so much for what your office does in helping our veterans, and we really appreciate you being here this morning.
If I
Yeah,
could.
go ahead.
If I could just ask, you said about 80 cases. Would you say that that's, I'm just getting your opinion, no, you didn't. But congressional district, what would you say the average is that you would, from other offices around the state?
Each office is different. I have heard from different offices that sometimes they don't handle things unless it's gone to a certain level. Like, for instance, with Social Security cases, some offices don't handle it unless it's at the hearing level. So with VA cases, unless it's at a certain level or a dire need type situation where the veteran may be at that age of, to expedite or homelessness or things of that nature, they may not handle it. So to kind of, give an idea of each office or each congressional office, it's kind of hard to tell because, certain offices handle things differently. We handle, if they come in, even if they just filed it and they're trying to get it adjudicated, we look at it and we take it and we let them know that it's going to be a little bit for them to process it because it was just filed, but we will take it and we'll work with it. Whereas some offices, they're like, no, it's got to be pending for at least 6 months before they'll even touch it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you for the invite.
All right, next we're going to hear from Mr. Peter O'Rourke, the president of the National Association for Veterans' Rights. And Mr. O'Rourke, you can either use the podium or the table, whatever is better for you. Okay. Very good.
Appreciate it.
And if you could just kind of introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background and what you've got for us today.
Sure, thank you. My name is Peter O'Rourke. I am the president of the National Association for Veterans' Rights, and in a previous life was the acting secretary for the Department of Veterans Affairs and the chief of staff. So have a little bit of experience with the department and specifically with disability claims going back about 2 decades of doing work in that area, both on the process and on some of the issues. So I've had quite a bit of experience there. To start, we can talk specifics about the process, but I think what Commissioner Ross provided you from an overall perspective of how a claim goes through the system is fairly accurate, and I appreciate her sharing that. But I have 2 points that I want to make about how we think about a disability claim. And one's just a personal pet peeve. A lot of times what you'll hear when you hear about disability claims, specifically for veterans, you hear it framed in the, since it's in the administration called the Veterans Benefits Administration, you get the sense that a disability claim is a benefit in some ways. In a lot of cases, those terminologies get mixed a lot. And I believe that's very unfortunate because I don't believe any service member goes into whatever service they choose to go into with the intent of part of their attraction to that is that they're going to be able to get a disability at the end of it and then have that as a benefit once they leave service. So I really think it's informative for us to really call it what it is. It is disability. It is compensation for disabilities incurred during their service, or as a reason for their, or as a happenstance of their service. So when you start thinking of it that way, and I appreciate the raising this to more the policy level, if we look at this as a disability compensation interaction between a former service member, a veteran, and the U.S. federal government, thinking of it in the benefits perspective, and we tend to slip into this, well, we're doing this good thing for them, and it's part of the contract. And I agree it is. We should be taking care of veterans and what we do to them as part of their service. But to couch it in the sense that we'll just take care of you, veteran, tell us what's going on, but then we'll represent you, we'll take care of it, and then we'll give you what we think you deserve, misses the point that this is, in true sense, an adversarial relationship between the veteran now and their former employer. When you think about it in that context, veterans are fighting for what they deserve, you could say, or really what's fair. They were harmed, they were created a disability that they will live with for the rest of their life, and it is our responsibility to take care of that, whether that's through direct compensation, whether that's through health care, or whether that's through a lifelong pension that we'd provide for them. Looking at it in that context then reshapes this understanding of, well, what does that process really look like? And as you see from that slide, when you are a veteran, the number one thing you have to do is then you have to go fill out a claim, or you have to have a claim filled out for you. What I don't know, and I don't know if it's really appreciated as much, is that's on the veteran to do. Again, another pet peeve, I really think the system should be more of us offering that. If this was truly we're going to take care of the veteran, we would just do that claim for them. We would look at their medical records when they separate, provide their disability compensation, reevaluate that every year, every few years, and make sure that we're continuously taking care of them. But that's not how it works. As you've heard, and as you'll probably hear from veterans, and probably what you've heard from constituents is, I have to fight for what I get when it comes to disability compensation. And I can tell you in a lot of those cases it is a fight, because they are dealing with an organization that I know pretty intimately that deals with that processed 2.4 million claims, as they'll be happy to say last year, which is a good thing, with an inventory of a little over 3.5 million. So they still deal with the backlog there, and you're still part of a system. But that's a lot of claims. It's claim numbers, it's processes. It's not a veteran dealing with, I have an issue and I want to get recognition for it. I want to be fairly compensated for it. I'm in a position where I'm bankrupt, or I'm almost going to be homeless, and I really could be great if the VA would process my claim and so I could get back on my feet. These are real issues that veterans face as they deal with this process. It sounds great when we talk about whether it's agents or consultants or coaches or appeals. That's all process work. When you look at it from a veteran's point of view, they're just looking at, how do I just get through this? And that's why when I hear from veterans, they don't even like to go through the process. And most, I won't say most, but many won't. Many will just say, it's too much a hassle, I'm not going to deal with that. Dealing with, and you've heard from the staff that, that sometimes there'll be complaints from VSOs, there's complaints in every part of this process, whether it's via people trying to help veterans with it, or from the institution itself and how they deal with it, or how they've adjudicated a claim, people don't agree with it, and then they have to go through an appeals process. So you get a lot of input and a lot of people complaining to you about those process things. But what I would ask is, look at it from a veteran's perspective. They're just coming in and saying, there's stuff wrong with me. I think it's due to the service that I gave to the country, and I'd like this to be dealt with. And so when we look at it from that perspective, what we come back to is like, well, what's best for that veteran in the sense of how they're going to navigate this process? And that's when we get to the topic that we're talking about today. I can tell you, we can talk about specifics and facts, but I can tell you that before my organization got installed, and really before with some of these private companies that have been helping veterans for almost a decade now have faced, is this ambiguity from the department of, well, you're not accredited, so you can't represent a veteran, and we're just going to ignore you. Because most of the time this was a smaller minority of veterans that were using some of these services and kind of just going on with their life. They got some help, did their claim, submitted it, and moved on. I can tell you after 2014, there was a significant backlog in cases, and the VA basically decided, well, we're getting a lot of complaints from veterans, so you know what, if veteran, you think you can do it better, fine. We're going to make a pathway where you can do a fully developed claim, and you just submit all your paperwork, and we'll just adjudicate it, and we'll just do this exchange. You do your thing, we'll do our thing, and we'll call it there. What they actually opened the door is actually a very smart thing, and I applaud them for making that decision back then, because what it actually started to do is it shifted the perspective in, okay, veteran, you can now take charge of your destiny in a sense. This is, relationship between us and you in the sense that you're claiming that there was a disability or there was something happened to you, and then we're going to do our side of it, and then there's this appeals process. So that really did open the door to veterans being able to take charge of their own disability claim. Very positive thing. And what sort of grew out of that then was, well, if I'm going to do that myself, I'm going to get the best expertise I can get, which we would all do in any other situation in our lives, whether we are a veteran or not. I'm going to do my taxes. I'm going to go find the best accountant I can find that can do it for me because I'm not good at it. Or I don't want to have to deal with the IRS or deal with all those rules. I'm going to get somebody to do it. I'll still file it, but that'll be the way that works. That's really what we're talking about here, is empowering veterans to be able to take care of this one issue. Now, there are many others at the VA, I can assure you. Whether it's pensions, aid and attendance, GI Bills become an issue here recently as well. So there's all kinds of issues that veterans have to deal with when it comes to the VA. This one shouldn't be where we're restricting veterans from having the best help they can get. Now that's a question, right? I mean, we've heard this, what is the best help that we can get? It's assumed that is through accreditation. But really when we dig in and pull the layers back on this, really all accreditation does is limit who the VA has to deal with, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about representation. We're talking about an accredited agent, and that means something. Those words are very specific for a reason. That means that you're giving me power of attorney to then deal with the VA on your behalf. That's great. If that's what you want to do, that's perfectly within your right to do. If you don't want to do that, you should have just as much of a right to say, well, no, I'm going to develop my own claim, I'm going to submit it to the VA, and I'm going to go head on with the VA myself. Okay, if that's what you want to do, that's great. Go find the best resources and get best help that you can have and do that. Now, that leads us to the discussion of, well, that's unfair, and there's derogatory names for people that help that, and there's claims about how people are going out and doing a lot of bad things. And I would wholeheartedly agree, there are. My time in the VA, we went after 2 different companies that were operating offshore and were not operating in a way that we would agree. Limited just like the VA is limited now with the resources both legally to do that, but you can make an impact on that, and you can communicate to veterans what they should and shouldn't be looking for. But unfortunately, the VA is not really doing that great of a job. They're just doubling down more on accredited and nobody else. But of course, that runs counter to the larger policy topic there of, well, we've given them an option to do it themselves, but you're either all on your own or you go with who we say you can go with. And I would submit that from a policy perspective, that's something we really should consider a little closer. But I think from this perspective, looking at how do we protect our veterans, whether it's here in the state of Georgia or nationally, is really providing really something that was brought up earlier, better consumer protections. Because that's really what we're talking about. Because in any other situation, any other employee-employer relationship, we would have consumer protections or other protections for them as they deal with whether it's a disability, slip and fall kind of thing that we would provide to them. So I think really looking at it from that perspective, again, that this is an adversarial relationship. I don't really see any other way of looking at it. I mean, we want to care for our veterans, but when we've harmed them, trying to repackage that into a special category that is completely stacked against the veteran in the sense of how that relationship is powered. I don't think that's fair to veterans, and certainly not what we would support with our association. Certainly not a personal opinion I would want to move forward with. So that's a little bit of it. Happy to talk more about specifics if you want to get in there. I do want to correct one thing, and I'll talk to the commissioner after this. It isn't a 20% restriction or cap on attorney's fees for appeals. It's actually 33 1/3% of back pay. So that's just one thing that I want to make sure we make clear. And that break between initial claims and supplemental claims and appeals is a stark line. It is two separate organizations at the VA. One is on the legal side and one is on the administrative side. So happy to take any questions. Yes.
All right, Senator McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Rourke, thanks for being here. I have a couple questions. Starting with your statement that you agree with my sort of policy description that this is not, I would agree with you, it's not a benefit, it's compensation, and the idea is to make somebody whole, not that anything ever could make
Right.
somebody whole in a disability context, but this is the best modern society can offer, is sort of well wishes and money that we rate somehow to be
Sure.
sufficient to compensate. Given that framework, isn't it all the more imperative, because they're not benefits, that a veteran receives every dollar of benefits of compensation that's calculated in response to their disability?
Absolutely. And that, as we would want, absolutely, with the caveat of, I wouldn't want to look at this as what typically is presented this issue as an appeal, where back pay is accrued from one point and then we would take a piece of that, like you're taking part of that.
Right, but you would agree with me that your organization and the position that you're here today to represent
Sure.
tends to advocate for allowing more veterans and more organizations to dedicate more veterans' benefits to the fee they would pay for representation, correct?
No, I wouldn't agree with it put that way.
Let me ask you this. Have you taken a position as an organization on federal law pertaining to the availability of fees for service in this regard?
Well, there's two pieces of legislation,
Right.
one that criminalizes and one that provides guardrails. Both of them talk about fees in the sense of that veterans can then go employ
But you've
expert
taken a
help to
position
do
in
that.
support of what you're calling the guardrails legislation, correct?
I would agree with veterans having choice, whether that's presented in that piece of legislation.
And that piece of legislation would expand the right of organizations and advocates to take more of the fee, namely on the initial
No,
claim, correct?
it actually, no, the way I would phrase that is it provides veterans access to whatever support that they want.
Yes, sir. I know how you would phrase it. What I'm asking you is, would you agree with me that it would expand opportunities for collecting fees to the initial claim, correct?
It would expand the availability of veterans to have access to.
I don't need you to keep
private
rephrasing what I'm asking. What I need you to agree with me, yes or no, it would increase the situations in which representatives would charge fees, correct?
I don't know that would be the case.
Okay.
You're drawing a conclusion to a
Okay, well, I mean, if you can't say yes to that question, then I think that puts kind of a gloss on the conversation we're having, which is that private industry is trying to replicate the functions that, for example, the commissioner's department does in Georgia. I'll repeat this, and I won't belabor this because I think I've kind of made my point. The VA relationship should not be adversarial. It should not be. You say that it is. I don't think it should be. And I think the idea would be that if we sanction expanding the use of private fees, if we embrace that as a policy solution, then what we're doing is making the judgment that the VA just doesn't work and that we think it's adversarial. We're giving up on the idea of publicly funded assistance with this, and we're just going to say, you know what, there's no better way to do this. It's inevitable, as you said. That would be your judgment, and the private market should handle it, and we'll say something about access. I don't think we should accept as inevitable that the VA doesn't work, and I don't think we should build into our policy as a fixed matter solutions that assume that the VA doesn't work. The last thing I'll say, and again, I don't want to belabor this, but I said it last time, we have now had 2 meetings where we've heard from national advocates for expansion of fees for service, but they have not had testimony specific to Georgia and whether Georgia has failed in the services that the department has provided to meet the needs of veterans in the state. So while I understand that there is a national push in the name of federal legislation, whatever, to expand situations in which veterans can pay more of their compensation to try to get these services, we have not had testimony about whether Georgia's provided services are inadequate. And that's all I'll say, but I do appreciate you being here.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions? Representative Clark?
Just want to say, Peter, thank you for speaking today and all that. I just want to say, I know we've had a discussion, myself, even Chairman Bond and all that, is, looking at what type of guardrails and, because we want veterans to have as many options as they want, but then also we want to protect them, their benefits and all that. I'll just say, I'm still looking at the issue and kind of where we should go and if we should expand or if we need to pass legislation to protect, the benefits of the veterans. I know personally from myself, serving and a lot of guys who have all that I've started with, front lines, door kickers, the bodies are broken, gone through a lot. They have a whole list of medical claims and situations that they've gone through that it should be an easy, hey, my body's broken. Like the government used me, which we volunteered, but now, we'd like to be taken care of, is what we want. And I know they have filed claims to different organizations. And again, my hat's off to every organization out there. And there's a lot of great ones and they try to do the best. But then a lot of times they fall through the cracks. And I know a bunch of my friends who have went and used different ones and some had some great outcomes and then a lot who were like, what? Like, I went through all this and then they went and got somebody who's a consultant or somebody, a buddy who had gone through the claim and figured out and helped them walk through it. And they got their help. So I'm definitely, totally open-minded to where, again, having the guardrails, but our veterans, I do know, are hurting, and I want to have them have that chance of being able to, have the guardrails, but then, if it's a fee, whatever it is, and having many options, I believe, because, I'm thankful for the VA, but then at the same time, the VA in huge ways have failed a ton of veterans, and I have buddies who have went and killed themselves because they didn't get the benefits that they believe that they deserved. I know they deserved, but then again, you have a lot of great people in there, so respect. But then at the same time, we need to always be looking at helping the veterans. So I do know we need to continue this discussion, but I'm definitely do know we need more options, and especially with consultants, I've seen that be a huge help. At least with a lot of my friends, they've gone and had a buddy help them, and yeah, they charge them a little fee. But in the end, they were able to usually get what they deserved. So just want to thank you for what you're doing and being a voice for veterans and have an open mind also, because in the end, we want to help the veterans.
I agree.
Thank you. Senator Harbison, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Rourke, I have a tendency to agree with you as it relates to the adversarial relationship between the veteran and the VA in the area of compensation awarding. I believe that would be accurate. But as it relates to the Georgia Veteran Services, I don't think that's a help organization only. They're there to serve. I just want to make that, in my mind, I would
agree with
clarity.
you.
I think that's...
And I would go further to agree. Every state that I've been to, and I've talked to almost every Department of Veterans Affairs, I don't think any of them are not trying to fill this same role. Everybody that's advocating for veterans on this side of the VA's border, if you want to call it, are advocating in their way. And that's a challenge, right? Even the best claims, whether they're accredited claims rep, it takes 6+ years to become a fully qualified claims representative that you can navigate the VA system. And just to give you the complexities, right, as you know, somebody brought up the PACT Act earlier, and you heard, PACT Act claims are going through fairly quickly. Does anybody know why? Well, it's because the PACT Act did something very special, very similar to what we did with Blue Water Navy with Agent Orange. You created a presumptive. Now that makes the claims process fairly streamlined, and that's great. That means that you match up veteran served at this time, this place, presumptive, your claim's done. Literally, that can take seconds to do. It can be automated if you really want to get crazy with it. And so that's a good thing. And so those claims can be done very quickly, and we would advocate that those claims don't require much help at all. Really, you could probably just do that on an online form. The VA is not doing it that way, but it's moving toward more automation. But that's part of it, right? And that's why you hear that older veterans or more complex cases take longer, because we have to do those by hand in the department. So it's, it can be adversarial, but if the process becomes streamlined, then, it becomes easier on veterans. So you get this mixed bag of folks that have a real struggle with the VA because most of their claims that they're making are not presumptive, so they have to be validated.
That's right.
So anyway.
Representative Jenkins?
You just touched on something based on your, say, somebody that knows a whole lot about this. Do you see a lot of opportunities for the Veterans Administration to make more presumptive claims for veterans based on where they were and what they did, so that, because ultimately the big problem is this 3-year appeal. That's absurd. And, the initial is not great, but the appeals process is just terrible. We got to fix that somehow.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with doing presumptives is the breadth and depth of medical evidence that you've got to have, that then you're basically applying across a whole group indiscriminately, right? I mean,
Right.
With Agent Orange, it became apparent that pretty much anybody in that area was likely to have this, and the preponderance of the evidence of cancers and things like that just became more overwhelming. It just eventually became the right thing to do. But even in that statement, that doesn't help you if you got pancreatic cancer 10 years ago. That doesn't really help you. I mean, the PACT Act did a great thing in a sense that it recognized those things, but it's kind of catching up, but it's also just saying, okay, we're going to give it to everybody, which is great if you truly have that issue. It's not if you don't and you just apply for it and get it. It becomes sort of an interesting part. You could elevate this to a policy level and talk about, well, maybe we should do something even different for veterans because they're all harmed in some way from war, right? I mean, you could take that anywhere you want to, but I think we should do a better job at really focusing on developing medical evidence to lead us to more presumptive conditions if that's possible. But I think there's a whole lot more work to be done just on the way we adjudicate these claims today, which substantially really hasn't changed in 30 years.
Representative Cannon?
Just had a question. Kind of want your opinion on. When I was serving, I was about a decade in a ground combat unit at the 3rd Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, Fort Benning, Fort Moore. And at that time, the focus was basically, for benefits that existed while you were in service, the GI Bill, health care, military discounts, that kind of thing for the families and for the service member. And, I guess disability was not even an issue until you kind of ETS'd.
Right.
And I guess that's changed a little bit, but in your opinion, has that shifted in today's recruits? And I kind of worry about a little bit of recruits joining the service with an intent to have some kind of disability claim when they ETS after a 5-year service. And are we losing some kind of focus on the actual service to the military, as opposed to, trying to 5 years of service, get out and get a government payment every month? I hope we're not losing our focus on that, because it really was not, briefed to us, 20 years ago. Sure. And we were deployed almost every year for 12 months, 15 months, lots of combat, and it wasn't really a topic that came up until we ETS'd. And then it was discussed briefly, but from what I'm hearing now, it's hit more and more to folks coming into the service. And I want to make sure we're not, shifting our focus from actually being in the military to having, some kind of payment from the.
Well, I think you bring up a really good issue when it comes to the relationship between the DoD and the VA, right? I mean, just like we said earlier, I mean, you don't go in the service to get a disability, right? So that's not really thought about. Some people do consider heavily the true benefits, the VA loan, GI Bill, and other things that can be part of that incentive. I think it's usually tacked on at the end. DoD usually doesn't focus on it as much, but there has been a push lately on the department side to both enroll, to have enrollees into the healthcare system and a push via the PACT Act. The PACT Act's a little unique in the sense that it recognized a much larger group of veterans for these presumptives than had been done in the past. Probably, I mean, even Blue Water Navy, Agent Orange wasn't anywhere near that, neither was Camp Lejeune. So that, you see this big surge to it. How it affects accessions and recruiting, I mean, that's really a DoD function on screening. What we see at the department a lot of times is, I think it's always been a percentage point, but poor screening on the front end. You bring folks in that might have a pre-existing condition, those kind of things. Once they're in, they're ours, and we're going to take care of those no matter how they present themselves later on in life. But that's always been kind of an issue for the department to deal with. Is you're a veteran when you go to MEPS and raise your hand. You actually become a veteran right then, because at whatever point in your service that you depart, whether you separate or retire, you now have access to the VA and the VA's benefits and the VA's processes. So I think we can do a better job, but I think that better job is expressed more in an efficient and effective method of dealing with everything from claims, pensions to these true benefits that we would provide to veterans, and on the healthcare side as well. And that's something that the department struggles with, and is going to require a sea change to really make that better.
Chairman Payne.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rourke. Thank you for being here. One of the things we've been doing this summer is a study committee on veterans and mental health. And so that just kind of, as you were talking, I just had that question as far as, because there's so much that, as the world is waking up in the last 20 years to see the necessity of mental health issues. I mean, now even our courts are, doing mental health courts and drug courts, and we're breaking it down, not just to bad behavior, but mental health issues. I just was looking at what more is being done in regard to even those who maybe didn't serve in wartime, but they went through hard time. I don't care if you served, especially in infantry battalion as I did, you're going to endure a lot. And so dealing with mental health issues after they get out.
Yeah, and even the variety of mental health issues, right? I mean, we lump a lot of stuff in mental health, and being more specific about those, especially from, just speaking from the Department of VA's perspective of how we really look at those and not just kind of lump them all together and generally, but explain those better to folks. You talk about the segregation on the court side. I'll tell you one thing that's great, and fortunately not as specific, but veterans courts have become a very, you don't want to use words like popular, very useful, I think, especially on the criminal justice side, but also for us on the VA side, to help folks through a very difficult time. I mean, we already know that mental health issues are going to lead you down a lot of paths, not just the path to suicide, but the path to whether it's significant financial issues or crime. And so having those courts where we can specifically key in on those issues, wrap services around a veteran and try to rehabilitate them from that point, which we'd love to have maybe been able to abbreviate that path at some point before it got there, but at least we have that safety net there to catch them and bring them back in. So if you have veterans courts here in the state of Georgia, definitely support them as much as you can.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. O'Rourke, thank you so much.
Thank
I appreciate that. We're going to move into our public comment section. I will just make two quick comments myself. I think there is a time value of money consideration when we talk about these things, that when these cases take 6 months, a year, 2 years to get adjudicated, I think that's definitely something, it's an issue, right? The second thing I will say, and Senator McLaurin, I completely agree with you. There is a component missing here, and this is the second meeting in a row where any representatives of the Veterans Administration, they have flat out refused to attend these hearings. So that is certainly an issue. The Congressman Bishop's office was gracious enough to provide some staff to give us a little bit of an insight into the federal picture. Commissioner Ross's department does a phenomenal job with adjudicating the claims that they have. Again, these are federal claims, and we were really hoping to get some information from the federal agency that actually handles those claims. We reached out numerous times and had communication, and so there is a big component missing, and that's information from the Veterans Administration. And I will tell you that for me personally, the mere fact alone that they refuse to participate or provide any information gives me a small indication of what that administration thinks of our veterans. That's the message it sends to me. So with that, we'd like to move on to our public comment, and this is all right. Good morning. If you could introduce yourself to us and share what you have this morning.
I'm Nancy Jean Smith, and I'm here on behalf of Veterans Guardian, and I would like to share my story. I do not remember the year, but I heard about Veterans Guardian through a friend of mine at church. I was reluctant to call them because I was working with a VSO officer through the VA, through many VSO officers through the VA, because one would leave and then I would have to start over again. And I kept being told that I had to keep my comments to 1.5 pages or less. And every time I would have to do all the work, get all the details, take it to the VSO officer. She would then feed it to the people in Atlanta. I would then make an appointment to come back, only to be told denied. So then we would do the appeal process. Again, I would have to do all the work. I would have to write it up, keep it to a page to 1.5 pages. I would go back. She would feed it to Atlanta. I would make an appointment to come back, only to be told denied again. And this went on for 5 years. 5 years it went on. Even though I was sent out to non-military doctors, and she received my records. They were transcribed, and they were talking about my feet, but 3 little letters were transposed, and all of a sudden, they started talking about my hands, but nothing was wrong with my hands. But yet I was denied because of that. Wasn't my fault. Yet I had to gather up all the information again, write it all over again, give it to the VSO officer. She fed it to Atlanta. Came back again, denied again. The VA did not help me at all. I should not have had to do all the work. The VSO officer should have sat down with me, with my records, saying, okay, this is what we have, and this is what I am doing. I should not have had to do anything at all. She should have written. She should have sent. I should not have had to do anything. But I had to fight. I had to fight for my rights. I had to fight to the point where I wanted to give up. After 5 years, I was ready to give up until somebody told me about Veterans Guardian. And when I called Veterans Guardian, Miss Samantha answered the phone, and she said, you'll get a phone call from Chris. And I'm going, I don't want to deal with a male. But I got that phone call from Chris, and I heard the loving care in his voice, and I didn't mind. But then he told me, he said, Miss Smith, you have a slam dunk case. You should have had 100% disability years and years ago. Go back to your VSO officer and tell him to do this and thus and thus and thus and thus. And I said, well, my VSO officer is a woman. And he said, we do not want to take your money. You have a slam dunk case, and we don't want to take your money. I said, you don't want to take my case? He said, no, it's not that, but we don't want to take your money. You have a slam dunk case. Go back to your officer and tell her to do this. I said, Chris, all that is fine and dandy, but I have been doing all the work. I have been doing this and thus and thus and thus and thus. For 5 years, I have been fighting. I've been doing all the work. He said, you shouldn't have to do that. And I said, and I've been denied for 5 years. I said, besides, COVID just hit. They're not working, and you are. Will you take my case? I do not mind paying. At that point, I was at 90%. And I was fighting so hard for my 100. At 80%, I was fighting so hard for my 100. But they gave me 10% from my PTSD, which put me at 90. Finally, after fighting all these years for my PTSD, they finally gave it to me after 8 years. Why? Why do I have to fight? Why does any veteran have to fight for what is rightfully theirs? So Chris said, call this number and tell them to fax these 2 documents to this number with your name on them. That's all you need to tell them. So I did. And then I called Chris back and I said, do you have it? And he said, yes. So then he said, you're going to get contacted by one of the lawyers. I do not remember her name, but her information is still in my computer. And she contacted me, and then she said, we need some documentation from one of your outside doctors. So I called the outside doctor and I said, fax my records to this number with my name on them. I called her. I said, did you get it? She said, yep. Veterans Guardian wrote an 84-page report on me. 84 pages. Now, they told me it'll probably take about 6 months to a year for you to get your 100% disability. Well, I went up to Saluda, North Carolina, because I was caregiving for my Aunt Alice before she died of multiple myeloma, because I was helping her. And this was before I was in a wheelchair. I'm waiting for a knee replacement. That's why I'm in the wheelchair. My 100% in less than a month. Now, the difference at that time between 90% and 100% was roughly $1,200 a month. Veterans Guardian took half of the $1,200 a month for 10 months. Now, you could choose to pay that any way you wanted. You could pay it in one lump sum, or you could take 10 months to pay it off. But it was something I never had. It was something I never had that was rightfully mine to begin with. That should have happened years ago. So I did not mind paying them. And I paid them off early, in less than 10 months. And that's my story.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Any questions from the committee? Senator Harbison?
First of all, Ms. Smith, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. It's really appreciated. Unfortunately, as a senator for the last 3 decades, I've heard that kind of story from too many people. And I certainly apologize that happened to you from my perspective. And it should have never happened, but it happens. And it has happened, and perhaps will be happen again. Sometimes it's because the person was reluctant in filing in the first place. Sometimes the records were lost, or because someone had a rather cavalier attitude about it or something like that. And sometimes it's just they're overloaded, and it's just a mixture of things like that. But it's just sad to hear your story like that. And I certainly hope that that never happens to anybody else. And you were very brave to come and tell that story, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. All right, now we've got Terrence Brown. Mr. Brown, you can either have a seat or go to the podium, whichever is more comfortable for you.
Hey, how you doing?
Good morning. If you could just tell us who you are, and then just if you could briefly summarize your story for us.
Terrence Brown. I'm originally from Charleston, South Carolina. So I've been seeing VA there since 1985. But now I just bought a home in Augusta, so I'm here now. I'm here on behalf of Veterans Guardian. Everything she said was true. The way Veterans Guardian sets everything up, they do all the work. All I had to do was submit my medical records, which was easy. And they handled everything for me. I noticed that this whole thing is about compensation. but it goes way before compensation. I got out of the military in 1983. I was injured on duty. It was in my medical records. When I got out of the military, the first thing the VA told me was the pain was in my head. So I went years without going to VA. So I sent a whole lot of letters to back then Senator Strom Thurmond, or his office, and I kept getting no good response. So this is what happened. In 1985, my disability, I got out of the military with 10%. It was upgraded to 20 5 years later, and 92. That's 10 years. And December 2014, I was increased to 30%. So from that 30, I stayed there until I contacted Veterans Guardian in 2019. That's when all I had to do was submit my paperwork, my medical evidence. The thing is, they got me up to 80%. That's money I never had. So whatever they charged me, I didn't care. My medical records had everything that was in there that happened while I was on duty. The VA never looked into my medical records. The whole time I was filing these claims, I thought that they were using my military medical records. It wasn't until last year that I asked to see a pain specialist. That pain specialist, I took the 2 pages of my medical records and showed her that she started to document what happened to me in the military. That was the first time VA took an MRI and X-ray of my neck, my back, and my hips. And they found I had a whole lot of problems. Last year, I tore meniscus in my knee, and I didn't know how I got there. I went to the VA. They took X-rays, ultrasound, and MRI and said they couldn't find anything. I came to Georgia after I moved here, and they wanted to know why Charleston didn't do anything about my knee, torn meniscus. I said they didn't do anything about my body, period. So I went and filed another claim with Veterans Guardian. I sent all my medical records from the VA and outside the VA. I did take this to VA before I sent it to Veterans Guardian. VA wouldn't even look at it. They said nothing happened to me while I was on duty except for a knee injury. Veterans Guardian put everything I had together. It's about 80 pages. I sent that into VA, and I'm still waiting. But the guy that did my CMP exam, he told me, he said, all this happened while you was in the military and they didn't do anything about it? I said, yes. So all this issue is not about CMP, compensation. It's about what goes on at the VA hospital. Everything she said was true. The process, the going to the VA, all the veterans organizations, you can go to them, and like she said, they want you to fill out 1 page. They do not ask you for your medical records or anything. So the information is there. No one looks at it. When I went to get my back examined for the VA with an outside provider, the person told me, well, VA gave us strict instructions as to what to look for and what to document. They're being coached on what to do. So I've been going through this issue from 9 March of '83 up until today. I have pain PTSD because I'm in pain every day. And every time I feel a pain, I think back to that day. It's not just about compensation, it's about the system. That's the story. Everything she said was true. But it's at the hospital. Some doctors will not even look at your injury. When you tell them what's going on with you, they don't listen. That's the problem. That's my story. Thank you, Veterans Guardian, for what you did. and hopefully I'll get my 100%.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions from the committee? Senator McLaurin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for sharing your story. I echo Senator Harbison's comments. It's brave for you to come here today and share this. We really appreciate you doing that. I am curious, how did you get connected in the first place with Veterans Guardian?
Well, I had to work, so I was driving a school bus. And I just happened to look out the window and I saw a guy I went to school with. He was visiting home from North Carolina. So I briefly told him what I was going through, and he gave me the name Veterans Guardian. And just like that, within, what, 10 months?
Sure.
Yeah.
Had you ever worked with a different claim representative before that?
VFW, American Legion, different people inside the VA hospital. It was that one page that everything had been worded on that one page, and that was it.
Okay. And I guess, because that is part of this issue, right, is we're talking about information pipelines. How do people get connected to the right resources that might be available? So, I mean, that is disturbing to me if, there's some organizations that basically treat it as a one-pager, if that's what you're saying.
That's what it
okay.
was. I did it about 10 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for coming today.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
It's okay.
Senator
Just talk.
Anderson, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brown, I don't know if I heard you clearly when you first began speaking. You said that when you first went to the hospital, they told you that it was just in your head?
That's the first thing VA told me after the military, even though it's listed on my
medical record?
DD 219.
Mm.
DD 214, yes. They still told me the pain was in my head. So I avoided the VA for about 5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate you and your service.
Thank you.
All right, next, Brian Smart.
Hey, good morning, Chairman. Thank you so much for letting me come before you today. I appreciate it. My name is Brian Smart. I'm retired out of the Air Force 28 years. I served both enlisted and as an officer for that. Retired from the J-STARS program. Very passionate about my time in the military and what it's done for me. I want to first thank Commissioner Ross and what she does for the veterans here. She does great things for that, and I appreciate it. I have, like the other two veterans, I thank you for what they've done, come forward to stand before and say that. Thank you so much. I, along with them, I retired in 2015, did my initial claims, and the VA come back with their rating. And I started appealing, and to answer you specifically, to use the DAV process, that was my representative. And we got to the point where they finally told me there's nothing else they could do. So basically, it's what I feel like the VA is very good at, is just keep pushing the veteran until they finally give up, because you get tired of dealing with the VA. Just like that's two instances right there of, we need another page, we need this, we need that. Well, okay, here's an instance. I was in Balad, Iraq. We had incoming mortars, and I was running away from the mortar, stepped in a bomb crater, twisted my knee, documented, just as he mentioned. And on my VA, they denied me for knee problems because it's not documented in my records. Just like he says, I can show you in my records where I was injured, taken to the hospital that day, but it's denied. Frustrating for me as a veteran to have to fight the VA when I've got it documented. The DAV, zero help, sir. Senator, zero help. Zero help. Okay? I want you to hear from me. You said you've not heard anybody locally. I'm standing before you to tell you I did not get the help I needed locally. And I know we can address that further. So I gave up. And about 3 or 4 years into it, I'm trying to figure out what to do. I'm tired of dealing with a VA on this. Talking to some friends, and they're like, have you thought about using anybody else? And I was like, well, I use the to who I'm supposed to use, an accredited agency. Got nothing. They're like, there's others that can help you. And I was like, really? So I start looking, and I start Googling. So here's another question you asked. I'm Googling all to find out these agencies. And guess what? The Facebook algorithm does its thing. Guess what pops up on my Facebook algorithm? Veterans Guardian. I'm like, let me see what this is about. I go look into it. And I'm like, man, if they can help me with anything. So I'm now 5 years post-retirement when I go approach Veterans Guardian. If they can help me with anything, even if it costs me, it's money that I never had that I should have had, as the example they're telling you. I'm willing to pay it because now I've got somebody that is standing up for veterans' rights. Is that not worth it? Absolutely, it's worth it. So they went to bat for me, and they got me to 90%. I paid them the money, and I contacted them. I said, what do I got to do to finish this out? Because I know that I can get this to 100%. And they're like, yeah, you have it. It's just how much do you want to fight? And I said, I want to do it. So they told me, go to your local doctors, get this documented paperwork, send it back to us, make sure it has these things on it. I did that. I went to my local doctor. This is recent. This is within the past 6 months. I'm still working. Retired in 2015, just remember that. Went to my local doctor. I said, I got these 5 things. I need to make sure that's in my case right here. I need to print it out, documented, so I can send it in to the VA. My doctor, not understanding the VA process, wrote 3 of them down and talked about that, gave me the notes on it, and I'm like, ah. So I contacted my orthopedic doctor, and he goes, the VA is very hard to deal with. I really don't have time to give you the paperwork that you need to submit. These are local doctors in Warner Robins, Georgia, right now. The VA is such a pain to deal with. They don't have time for it. I contacted Veterans Guardians. I said, my doctors are no help. What do I do? Are you willing to travel? Absolutely, I'm willing to travel. I went to North Carolina to a doctor in North Carolina with my records. I go over, he reviewed everything, and he says, I don't know why you're here. You've got everything you need in your records. I said, I agree. How do we make this package go so I can get it to the VA? Just like she mentioned, I got a packet, 68 pages. My wife's an RN. She looks through this, and she's like, this is good. She said, this is what the VA needs because of the language that you have to use to get the VA to understand what your problem is. You can't say, my right knee hurts. I got to use the technical term for whatever it is that goes along with that. Veterans Guardians has done so much to help me get to this point. And the way I think they represent us veterans that have no other representation, that it gives up on us at some point. I will tell you, I've got a friend right now that is with Veterans Guardians because he has used all the local resources he can to try to get his case finished. And he's now with Veterans Guardians trying to push it across the line. So my personal opinion, this is Brian Smarts, I don't think it would be fair for someone to set a policy that tells me I can't use someone to fight for me as a veteran to get the compensation that I deserve. Is that what we ask you senators to do, is set a policy that tells me I can't use somebody to help me receive a benefit? I think that needs to be thought about a little bit. Now, if it's your concern is they're taking the money away from me that I deserve. Retired in 2015. If I deserved that money in 2015, why did I not receive it then? Why am I in 2024 fighting the VA to give me that compensation? So I think it needs to be thought about, not you're specifically looking at the money side of when they're charging me to do this. I'm pretty sure if you ask any veteran out there, would you be willing to pay if I can help you get the rights you deserve from the VA? Every veteran is probably going to say absolutely, because I'm not getting that compensation. They're not giving it to me. I'm having to work to get it. To a point you made, when I went in the military, I had no idea the VA was an option. This benefit, never knew it. So that's not something we were told we could even have until I was separating. And then, as they mentioned, it's on the member to get it. Mr. O'Rourke made a point that I could have jumped up and praised when he said the VA ought to work for that veteran when they're getting out and help them get those benefits. But that's not the way it is. We, the veteran, are responsible for chasing to get those benefits, and it's very frustrating. Senator, I also like to address, you made the point, are people coming in the military now just to get veterans benefits? I don't know that because I'm not there, right? But would that be any different than a school teacher knowing the benefits that they have available when they start a job? Or if they worked at the post office, you know what benefits when you hire on at a position with a company, you know the benefits of that position. Is it wrong for us as the military to say one of the benefits that you will have is we will look at what happened to you and you may be compensated for your service? So I think that to look at it in a fairness aspect, let's put it into the corporate world and see how that would lay out there. I just thank you for your time today. I thank you, Chairman, that you care enough to come to Warner Robins and hear from veterans. I thank you that you give us the opportunity to stand before you and tell about our positions. I don't know how many veterans are out there, but there's a lot in the room out here, and every veteran has a different situation. Every veteran saw combat in some way different, right? There's some that never saw combat. There's some that we had the person right beside us that was killed, and we have the survivor guilt that we deal with every day, right? We don't understand. Just good Lord protected us to get us here to this point. So I think every veteran has a different type of song or dance that you're going to hear out of them. Everyone deals with the mental things completely different. One of the things I've always said was I would love to see a study on how a veteran can compartmentalize the effects of war on PTSD and such. I have friends that are just basket cases because of things that happen to them. And then there's people that you compartmentalize it and you tuck it away in the back of your mind and you never want to open up that door again, right? So what is it in life that makes that veteran able to do that? I don't know. Way smarter than I am. But again, Chairman, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and I'll yield to you for any questions you may have, sir.
Any questions? Senator McLaurin?
Chairman, thank you, Mr. Smart, for your comments. Since you engaged me directly, I do want to clarify, I am not here today to defend the VA's treatment of claims. And I think the chairman's absolutely right that if the VA wanted to demonstrate their care and commitment, they could be here, but they are not.
Agree.
When I'm talking about local testimony, and you mentioned that I was talking about Georgia-specific testimony, what I'm really interested in figuring out is how much people understand that we have a resource in the Department of Veterans Service. And some of the accredited organizations already exist to do initial claims and do them well. Now, just to clarify for everybody, because I know we've discussed some of the technical points, I mean, the current law is that you can pay a fee to an accredited organization for an appeal. Right? And as we were talking about at the beginning of the discussion, we kind of had this current policy judgment that we should give it a shot at publicly subsidizing everyone's claims process to start with, But then if there is a mistake, if there's an error, and God, I hear you that 9 years in your case and in so many other cases, waiting the years for the stuff that you deserve is crazy. It's offensive, right? So I think that I hear you that it's not enough to say, well, you always have access with the appeal. We need access for the initial claims as well to get them right. My big question for the committee, and I guess one follow-up question I do have for you, Mr. Smart, did you engage the Georgia Department of Veterans Service directly on your initial claim, or was it a different organization that handled the initial claim?
The initial claim was handled through the DAV.
DAV.
That was my Department of Veterans Affairs. It's their local representative.
Okay.
So that VSO is what he's talking about. So that's who they refer us to.
Okay.
As we do that. So
sure. And I want to say too that I misspoke earlier when I said if I gave the impression that I'm saying let's fix the VA first and then worry about claims. I know that that's an uphill battle. I guess what I wanted to focus attention on is it's not just the federal government. We've got a state government that is dedicating resources actively to doing this type of adversarial back and forth with the VA. And what I want to know as a committee, because we're the state government, right?
Sure.
We don't make the decision about the federal law we're talking about or the VA.
Absolutely.
So the question I've got is, how can we bolster the resources we're already using at the state level before we wave the white flag and say, we can't get it done, we can't provide Georgia veterans with the claims process they need at no cost, right? Because in a perfect world, we would love for veterans to get every dollar they deserve. So I just want to make sure, and this is where my comments are coming from, so you understand I am not ever going to look you in the eye or anyone else and say, yeah, you need to wait around, right? That's not me. What I do want to know is, are we effectively routing people to the Georgia resources that do already exist? Because some of them are insufficient. This one-page stuff, insufficient, right? But we do have some resources out there, and I really am taking an interest in, and maybe it's a question for you, how can we better get veterans connected to the resources, the more on the 80-page side of things than the one-page side of things?
Sure. Yeah, well, one thing I will tell you, and this is Commissioner Ross right here, we have the Georgia Vector Center, right? So Vector has been a huge asset to our community, but the problem is you're only in a community, right? So, I mean, yes, she has done great work, and that is awesome what it does. I think, and I hadn't talked to her about this, but I think you're going to have a lot bigger staff for her to work with. I don't know what staff size hers is, right? But if you're wanting to service the veterans of Georgia, Commissioner, I'm going to ask you real quick, how many veterans do we have in Georgia? Estimate. 700,000. Right. How many people you have on your staff? Is that a good percentage? I mean, you guys tell me. You're the one making the policy. To me, I think she needs some help. And if you want to get the help out there, then the commissioners probably needs it. And look, okay, so I found mine on Facebook. Do you allow her to advertise her on Facebook? So there's every veteran has to go to out processing briefings, right? The VSO is represented at every one of those briefings, but is there someone from her company at every one of them? I don't know that, right? So, but I think what she does and what she represents is what you need to focus on if you want to help veterans, not necessarily worrying about if I'm having to pay somebody on my own free will. As Mr. O'Rourke said, if I choose to go get a lawyer, I'm doing that on my own fruition, not because you, the state, are telling me I can or can't do that. So I think
the truth is that we have lawyers. We had volunteer lawyers who came to our last meeting. Lawyers I recognize from you talk about the legals. Like one of the guys, I almost thought he was a lobbyist. I got confused. I was like, is he a lobbyist? No, he's one of the partners at BME, right? So some of the most serious lawyers in the state dedicate, and they're veterans themselves in many cases, and they dedicate their own personal pro bono time to helping. And this is a key clarification, there is no law that prevents a veteran from getting that type of pro bono help from somebody who's willing to offer it for free.
Sure.
That access exists, but I take the point that this is a conversation about whether access is greater if people are allowed to charge a fee. And Mr. Smart, again, this is not me trying to be a nanny state, whatever, about veterans who are trying to get what they're due, but we have heard testimony about the unscrupulous elements. There are companies, and I would much rather be certain that we are putting veterans in this vulnerable situation in the best hands possible than sort of opening the floodgates because of a generic sort of appeal to access. That's my main concern.
And I'm not gonna argue that point because I think it's valid. You know, I have some friends that have used some people that has charged a lot of money to help them get benefits, way more than I will ever pay to veterans guardians. So I can appreciate that you care about that, but I think that what you're seeing then is the frustration level of the veteran that he or she has went as far as we know how to do, and the only thing they do, and most times it's a recommendation from a fellow veteran, is how you find somebody else to help you, right? So I think it would be the advertisement of what's available, the getting the word out on what Georgia is doing to help the veterans is probably to answer your question specifically.
I appreciate your time very much, and I also appreciate your time doing this sort of philosophical exercise for the committee. But I think it's a conversation.
I expected nothing less.
Well, there you go. But it's a conversation I think we need to have. So I appreciate that we had time to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for letting me talk with you.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. And just to clarify for members of the committee that may not be aware, the only entity that the state of Georgia funds to process these claims is the Department of Veteran Services. So that is the only monies we provide. Thank you, Mr. Smart. All right. Next is Mr. Phil Martin. And wherever you prefer, Mr. Martin, you can.
Good morning. My name's Phil Martin. I'm a national legislator for the Department of Georgia. I'm also what they call a service officer. I call myself a resource officer. I've been doing claims and filing appeals for veterans through GVSO for 13, 14 years. Why? Because it's a law. Because it's a law. Now, so you understand, every veteran has access to My Healthy Vet. He can load it up in his computer, come up with a password, and I'll stay right here, and he can do his own claim. He can pull up his own medical records. He can do all of that. Right? Problem is, they don't know about it. I spent 24 years in the Army. I retired after Desert Storm. I didn't even know what the VA was for 12 years. I found out about the VA when I went to get a driver's license, and it just happened to be the lady down the road from me. And she goes, "Phil, why don't you have a veteran's..." Everybody in the bunker. That's quite all right. I enjoyed it. But as I was saying, I went to get her driver's license. She said, "Well, Phil, I know you're a veteran. How come you don't have a veteran's driver's license?" I said, "I don't have time. Here's my $12. I got to go." She refused and said, "Take your 214 in this form, go to the Georgia Department of Veteran Services, have it certified." That's when I found out about the VA. Now, I hate to admit this, but I retired as a lieutenant colonel. Yeah, and why the hell didn't I know about the VA? when I left. That's all changed. I retired in '92. My two sons recently retired in the last 4 years. They went through a process. Both of their claims were filed before their last day in the service. They got their next check the same month they got their retirement check. Things have changed. Is it perfect? No, sir, it's not. VFW has what I call service officers. We're really resource officers. And the point I made earlier is every veteran has access to his records. Now, whether he knows that or not, or she, I'm sorry, you know, I don't run every post, nor do you, or every Air Force base, or every Army installation. And some people, I debrief the Georgia National Guard when they come home from deployments. Probably the hardest thing I ever do, and I'm there to talk to them about veterans' benefits. And I know they don't, only 10% of them hear what I got to say. I've been back in the States for 4 or 5 days, and I'm telling them about my benefits and how to get on the computer, where their medical records are, where their 214s are, how to sign up at the local VA clinic, if they got a claim, who to go see. But I don't know that only 10% of them hear me, because the other 90% are transitioning to a civilian life. They're going home to their families. They've been gone for 6 months, 9 months, a year. They don't hear me. Same thing happens on active duty. And we do a poor job of letting our veterans in the state of Georgia know what resources are available to them. Right? GVSO does a great job. I have veterans at my house every week. How in the hell they find me, I don't know, but I don't turn them away. They show up, they call me, I go to their houses. I do DICs, aid and attendance. I sit down with them. Most of the time we open up their computer, if they have it. There's their medical records right there. We go through it, they tell me, oh, I was injured October 1996. I was in NTC, in a truck wreck. Spent a month in the hospital. Boom, there it is. Go right to the record, find it. Print that out. We put all those resources together. I take them to Statesboro or Grovetown or Savannah and turn them over to the GVSO. What I do is try to have what they call a full developed claim. It's free. They earned a benefit. Why should they have to pay somebody to help them? You know, I don't have a problem with Guardian or any other organization that helps vets. They have that right. Sometimes I wonder about whether our state takes care of 700,000 veterans. Okay? We have one VSO in Statesboro. Says we're getting another one. Recently, we have 2. 3 years we've had one. We have 14,000 veterans in just that county that I advocate for medical care. That one man can't take care of 14,000 vets. I take most of my people to Grovetown because they have 2 excellent claims people that work there, and I'm willing to take them there if they're willing to go. Now, I have some that don't. They elect not to. They can file their claim right there on their computer. They can file their appeal on there. It's free. Like I said, I've been doing this 14 years. I call myself a resource officer. I'm not accredited. Right? I've done one appeal in 14 years, and I probably assisted 500 or 600 people. It's just knowledge. Right? When I have a question, I know I can call GBSO. I might not get an answer today, but I will get an answer probably by tomorrow. All I'm trying to do is help veterans get to an accredited place because that's what the law is. Right? That's what the law is. Now, if the law's wrong, I'll change it. Okay? I don't have any medical records. 24 years in the Army, 9 months in the hospital, 2 Purple Hearts. I have 0 medical records. None. VA claims they don't have them. Government claims they don't have them. I know I don't. Because when I retired in '92, your medical records belong to the government. Today, when you get out, they give you a copy of your medical record. But they didn't back when I did. So the only thing I can claim and successfully claim with a VA is presumptive. The rest of the things I just deal with. But I think the issue, it is compensation. I think we're all in agreement on that. We know that the system's not perfect. We're not here to fix a VA. I don't think we can fix a VA. Right? But what does the law say? Right? And I don't think veterans, including myself, should have to pay anybody to get what is compensated. And that's all I have to say, sir. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions for Mr. Martin? All right. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you being here. All right, we have one more, Mr. Bill Taylor, our last public comment.
Oh, may I say one thing?
Absolutely, yes, sir. Just say it to the microphone so we can hear you.
We talked about mental health that came up a moment ago. You know, I was in D.C. in September advocating for the shortfall for the VA, $4 billion shortfalls, pay benefits 1 October. And one of the things that we talked about up there is mental health in the VA. When you look at the percentage of veterans, the percentage number, based on the total number of veterans and those that are afflicted with mental health, we, the VA, should be leading the technology or the programs for mental health care. The VA has 2 programs: medication, psychiatrist. There are 21 other programs out there that people or organizations use to treat mental health. But the VA only has 2. Yeah. I would ask that when we look at mental health care in the state of Georgia, that we share those new technologies, those new methods with the VA, or actually convince the VA, since they have the largest percentage, to be the leading element. Right? So mental health is an issue, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Especially among the military.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
That is a part of what Senator Payne's committee is looking at as far as veterans homelessness, and then Commissioner Ross does a great job in advocating for our veterans in that regard. So, Mr. Taylor, if you could introduce yourself to us again. And
Yes, Mr. Bill Taylor. I'm one of the founders of Veterans Guardian. I really just have 2 issues I'd like to address real quick. The issue about what the law currently says is not as clear-cut as it's being indicated here. prior to 2006, the law was very clear. You couldn't assist with the preparation, presentation, or prosecution of a claim unless you were accredited. That's what the law said prior to 2006. In 2006, the law was changed, and they added the agent or attorney qualifier. And now the law says you can't do those three things as an agent or attorney unless you're recognized by the VA. That language was intentionally changed in '06 for whatever reason. We can have debates about the reason for that, but words and laws have meaning. So then the question comes down to, if you are not acting as an agent or an attorney, then you are not subject to the regulations under the VA rules right now. We never take that step into agency. What does agency mean? In 2006, when the VA wrote the rule on the law, they defined agency as completing the power of attorney form and becoming the veteran's representative to the VA. That is a very specific term. It has specific meaning. You look at Black's Law Dictionary, what does agency mean? Agency means representing before. There is clear case evidence and precedent to support the government regulating people practicing before a government agency. If we are acting strictly as consultants to the veterans to help them prepare their own claim packet, and then they are submitting that claim packet on their own behalf, we are never taking that step into agency. And we believe, and we have had the Third Circuit in an initial ruling in a case we're involved in, has also agreed that if we are not acting as an agent, then we are not in violation of the federal law. So now that we need to make that determination, are we or are we not acting as an agent? I would submit to you that we are not. We have ensured that we are not. I have no interaction with the VA. I don't have access to any of the systems. I don't represent a client. I don't submit claims to the VA for the client. So we are never taking that step into agency. And this is a very important thing to understand when we're talking about what's legal and what's not. The second thing I'd like to address is I was asked at the last hearing to provide numbers on the number of my clients that had used a veteran service officer previous to coming to us. We have provided that infographic. It's a one-slider that we've provided. We went through our records and we were able to verify that 54% of my clients in Georgia had previously gone to a VSO. How we did that is we looked at all of the decision letters for every one of my 4,298 clients, and if they had a veteran service officer listed as the representative, they're included in that 54%. The remaining 46% didn't have a VSO listed on the decision letter. That doesn't mean that they didn't try and go use a VSO, but I can't validate or verify what their experience was with the VSO previously. And so the answer to that question is at least 54% of my clients had gone to a VSO. We also provided a further breakdown on what organizations those veterans were with, and you can see Georgia Department of Veterans Service, DAV, American Legion, and the VFW were the top four that we encountered. In our experience, I don't think, we have not experienced that it's a lack of knowledge on the veterans' part on what their options are. This data shows you that they know what their options are, and they've tried them, and they're looking for something else. And if you have any questions.
Any questions? Senator McLaurin?
Thank you for coming today and for this slide. On just kind of a nerd Georgia legislature note, this might be the single most effective response to a question in a committee hearing I've ever seen, just because I, in fact, asked you specifically for this information, then you brought it. So I just want to say thank you for that. I do have a clarification or follow-up question on this, though. Is this data reflecting clients who have successfully modified their rating after using your services, or is it just people who are in your database, your client database, who have previously, like this, does this necessarily mean that 923 people who use DVS got a rating modification through you, or it just means that 923 people who have talked to you also talked to DVS?
These are, all of these folks are clients that we worked with and submitted a claim to the VA.
Okay.
So from that number, if I look at just the number of Georgia residents in my database, that's probably in the tens of thousands.
Right.
This is clients that came on with us that chose to use our services after we told them what we could or couldn't do. They make that choice, and we have submitted a claim with those. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've been finally adjudicated yet, but based on our averages, about 90% of, at least 90% of these folks are getting an increase in their benefits.
90% general success rate for your organization is what you're
Yes.
saying, is some sort of rating difference. And so the total client number 2323,
Yes.
that's so the total VG clients in Georgia, you say up here, is 4298.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's 2018 to current. And then of those, 2,323 have used a VSO before.
And like I said, we looked at their
Okay.
decision letter, and they had a VSO listed by name as their representative. Because if you don't, because we don't become their representative, because we don't submit the claim, the veteran is submitting it on their own behalf. Unless you actively go in and remove a prior VSO representative, it stays that way in perpetuity. So we don't have our clients change that because there's no reason to burden them with an additional task to do. So I can honestly tell you the 3 stories that you heard today, I can tell you there's 23,000 more veterans that are probably going to tell you a similar story right here in Georgia.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we've come to the end of our committee hearing. We've run a few minutes after. I'll ask Senator Payne if you'd like to offer any closing comments.
Well, I just thank everybody for being here and taking part in this, and just those who are here that came to testify of your stories, thank you so much, because nothing is more powerful than a firsthand experience to convey what you've been through and what you've experienced. And so we just thank you wholeheartedly for being here today and bringing your story with you.
Thank you. So our next hearing is going to be November 19th, and that's going to be in Augusta at the Cyber Center in Augusta. We'll put that information out. It's going to be the same time, 10 a.m., and look forward to any of you that can make it. I would like to, again, extend our thanks to Representative Ballard, who had to leave for a TV interview, for coordinating this, the Aviation Museum, the 21st Century Partnership, also our House Media Services team. We appreciate y'all providing all the audio and the live stream. Thank you. To our analyst, Amber Mack, and to my admin, Ronnie, who helped to coordinate a lot of this. We thank y'all so much for coming and hope to see y'all in November. And if there's no other business before the committee, we will adjourn. Thank you.